everyone. This is the co-host of Mystic Radio, Elizabeth Diane. I'm thrilled to co-host Mount Shasta's Mystic Radio with Robin Alexis and Elizabeth Diane. Spirit Lady Robin Alexis, who is not with us today except in spirit, and I are, among many other things, the authors of Amazon's best-selling book, Shasta the Skunk Honey Bee Hero. I'm also the illustrator. The book is a timeless treasure on belonging and community for children and adults, and what we learn about the bees is priceless. All profits from this book go to one of the sponsors of Mystic Radio, BeWellHive.org. I was called to establish this nonprofit, the Be Well Hive NFP, which is a 501c3, for nurturing wellness and building resilient community in Mount Shasta and beyond borders. The other sponsor of Mystic Radio is Robin's soul healing business, robinalexis.com. I am a sustainable home designer and the owner of Lucid 9 Design, and also the founder of Sacred Geometry Portal podcast and the website where I offer instruction, art, and inspiration. You can find the links to reach me in the description of this podcast. So I'm inviting you to be a guest, to sit in the seat of honor on Mount Shasta's Mystic Radio and share what you are doing that makes your dream for a better community come true. Did you write a book? Do you have a retreat center? Do you take care of the land or care for feral cats? What's your vision to create a better world? We want you as a guest on Mount Shasta's Mystic Radio. What are the things that you do to tend to your community? How can we make our dreams a reality? Our next guest is doing that in a unique way, helping to restore what I will call a higher love on this planet. So with us today, Keyth Neso is a student and teacher of the Ancient Nasarean Essene teachings. He's a certified hypnotherapist using the QHHT modality, a composer of orchestral music tuned to 528 hertz. Oh my gosh, it's beautiful too. And he's a pianist, an artist, a retreat leader, and an author. His first book, the Essene Tarot in the Ancient Marseille, and his companion deck, the Tarot of the Blue Rose, are ushering in a new age of understanding in regards to the origins of the first edition Tarot de Marseille, as well as their connection to the Nasarean Essenes and the Mary Magdalene Mystery School, which is the Order of the Blue Rose, founded in the south of modern-day France. His handmade tarot decks have been sold to collectors across the globe. His video series, The Golden Braid, details his journey of spiritual initiation, and he introduces the teachings of the Nasarean Essenes whilst providing compelling mathematical data to support the authenticity of the Nasarean scrolls. So, welcome, Keyth.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
So most people have heard of Mary Magdalene, Christianity, Jesus of Nazareth, and the Essenes. They know about tarot cards and maybe some of the ancient Essene writings, like the Dead Sea Scrolls. Many have heard of QHHT and a technique that's developed from the research of Dolores Cannon. But the recently re-emerging knowledge that you are bringing forth uncovers a very important information for this current time, and the connections that involve an Essene Bible, Gematria, Ethiopia, Dolores Cannon's research, messages from Mount Shasta and the Lemurians, and the original Tarot, the Tarot de Marseille. I am excited for our listeners to find out about this new information. So Keyth, can you give us a brief history of your initiation into this newer knowledge?
Ooh, brief. Okay. this is all explained in detail in the Golden Braid, the 3-part video series I created, by the way, for anyone who feels like they want to go deeper. But I think, like all of us who become very powerful spiritual leaders in this new age, bringing back new old information, I was bankrupt. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was here to do. I was carrying a lot of pain and trauma around. I was numbing it with alcohol and other substances, and in a state of self-loathing. I was very suicidal for much of my life. And it was a 10-day juice fast in 2017 with a spontaneous fasting partner that pretty much kidnapped me. That's a little harsh. He said, "We're going to the desert for 10 days in fasting, and you're coming with me." And I agreed. And that
That's
was
a
my
good
first
friend.
fast. It was a good friend. It was a very twin flamey, interesting kind of relationship with a lot of twists and turns. But this
I know
person
that one.
certainly this person certainly activated me for sure. And during those 10 days of fasting in the West Desert, driving around, and when you do your first fasts, I had shamanic voices coming out of me that I didn't understand. I had negative entities attached to me that I didn't know were there, that were showing their ugly faces, wanting to be released. And I was new to all this, so I didn't understand what was going on. But I remember we would come to crossroads on these 10 days, and my fasting partner would pull out his tarot deck, which had a blue star on it because he saw the blue star fall at the Four Corners on December 12th, 2021. So he bought a tarot deck with a blue star on it. It's the Hopi prophecy. Yeah.
Yes.
So we would come to a crossroads, and he would pull out his blue star tarot deck and choose one card for option A and another card for option B. Now, like most people, I'd heard of the tarot, but I was extremely skeptical and spiritually bankrupt, as I said. But during these instances, I saw the power of the cards firsthand. I was like, okay. I was like, this is beyond coincidence. Something's going on here with these cards. So that's when I was introduced to the tarot, and really, they grabbed my attention. The cards did. And after coming home from that 10 days, I was a changed man. I shaved my head. I was awakened. I fasted on nothing but juice for 10 days, and felt better than I didn't know I could feel that good. And I had also been introduced to some of the teachings of the Pleiadians through the author and channeler Barbara Marciniak. It was a big part of my awakening process. She wrote that wonderful book called Bringers of the Dawn in the 60s, which is a spiritual classic these days. So when I got home from those 10 days, I was like, I really want my own tarot deck. And I was like, which one do I buy? Um, and just so happens one of my good friends was really interested in spiritual information as well, and she had just read the Alejandro Jodorowsky book called The Way of Tarot: The Spiritual Teacher and the Cards, which details the restoration and printing of this deck in 1997, the original Tarot de Marseille. I know it's not focusing well, but so she had the book on the restoration of the most ancient form of tarot known to man. The earliest this deck is traced back is 1471. So she gave me the book and said, if you want a tarot deck, read this book. You've got to get one of these Marseille decks. So I read it. I was hooked, and I wanted to buy one of these decks, but I couldn't find them. They were out of print. They were selling for a lot of money on eBay. I did find a used deck for about $40, and that's this one. I bought it. I call it the Mother of 1,000. It's my template deck that I use when I create my handmade cards. I count every line. And so the process started. I started making my own deck. Because before I found the one that was affordable on eBay, I said, well, I'm an artist. I should go to the art store and find some thick cardstock, and I'll make my own deck using PDFs of the digital images. And that's how I began, until I tracked down a physical deck to use as a template, so I don't have to use technology when I create. So that's how it began. And I just kept making deck after deck. The first deck I made was riddled with errors. I translated it into the wrong language. I wasn't counting the numbers of lines. I didn't yet realize how meticulously designed these cards are, because they're encoded with prophecy using pictures, symbols, numbers, and color. So I wasn't happy with the first deck. I gave it away to my friend, and I started my second deck the very next day, which is the deck I've done all my thousands of readings with. I'm now literally in the middle of creating my 9th deck. There's one of the cards in the process of being created. Sorry about the blur and the focus, but I'm creating the 9th deck, and this is the one that's going to be printed and mass produced as the Tarot of the Blue Rose. So in between now and then, after making the tarot deck and reading the Jodorowsky book, I found Dolores Cannon. And 30 hours later, after watching one of her YouTube videos, I was buying all of her books, and her first book published in 1985 was Jesus and the Essenes. So that was my introduction to the Essenes. I'd not heard of them before. And I grew up in a strict religious household, and the name Jesus wasn't something I really cared to reconnect with. But her book of Jesus and the Essenes, and the way that story was told through her method of gathering information using regressive hypnosis was unbelievable. It's so beautiful. I really, really resonated with it. I've read all 20 of Dolores's books 3 times with a highlighter. Can't get enough. There's just so much information there. And then I was doing readings in 2020. So a few years had passed. As I was doing readings, I became certified in Dolores Cannon's QHHT modality, which stands for Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And then I was called to Sedona, and I was doing a batch of readings using my handmade deck. And I was sitting next to this woman who was watching my every move for hours. And I finally got a break, and she leaned over and asked me where I got my cards. And I told her, well, thank you. They're handmade. She's like, you made those? I was like, I did. It's how I learned. And I told her it's the most ancient form of tarot. It's traced back to 1471. It predates the printing press. And every time I make a deck, I learn more information about them. It just gives me its wisdom through the process. And I said, I don't know how I know this, but somehow this deck of cards is attached to the Essenes, and it's the Marseille deck. Marseille is a town in the south of France, because Mary Magdalene traveled to Sainte Marie de la Mer, which is right near the modern town of Marseille, France. Back then it was called Gaul, before it was called France, but that's where she landed after floating across the Mediterranean after Yahshua, her husband, was crucified. So she took the deck of cards and their child, the Holy Grail child, with her on a boat across the Mediterranean, and landed at Sainte Marie de la Mer, where she established the Essene Order of the Blue Rose. I didn't know all of that until I read the book that was gifted to me in Sedona that night in November of 2020. I said, I don't know how I know this, but this deck of cards is somehow attached to Mary Magdalene and the Essenes. And the person sitting next to me, she's a beautiful Black woman with long dreadlocks. Her eyes just got as wide as saucers. And she said, did you just say the Essenes? How do you know about them? And I said, well, Dolores Cannon, Jesus and the Essenes. She goes, who's Dolores Cannon? So I was like, well, how do you know about the Essenes? And she told me someone had approached her at a conscious music festival and said, I feel very strongly guided to invite you to an Essene gathering in Oregon. And she didn't know what she was in for, but she said yes. She felt guided to go. And I didn't know there was a working Essene church in Oregon, but there is. And they are responsible for printing and publishing this book, which is the Holy Megillah, the Nasarean Bible of the Essene Way, which is all blurred out. So she gave me the book that night in Sedona, and I was just amazed. I didn't know it existed. At the time I received the book, it wasn't available to the public yet. You had to call the high priest and the translator of the scrolls and order a copy from him directly. It's now since subsequently been released. But this early green version was just a first early printing. There are more chapters now. It's the scrolls are still being translated. The process has been over 40 years. So I took the book home. I reluctantly accepted it as a most amazing gift. And I was just amazed on my first reading of the Holy Megillah that so much of the information in Dolores Cannon's books is echoed in this book, or maybe vice versa, like verbatim. And then on footnote 560, I read about the Essene Order of the Blue Rose. And that was significant because the second tarot reading I ever did was for a heroin addict, and she had no money to give me after the reading, but she wanted to give me a gift, and she gave me this blue rose pin.
Blue
And
rose. Oh my
the
goodness.
cloth that covered the Megillah that I was gifted was also covered in blue roses that looked exactly the same. And Dolores Cannon used blue roses in her lecture series on her promotional posters and didn't know why. She said,
Wow.
whoever uses the words blue rose together. So the blue rose had been following me all the way through this journey, and I didn't understand why until I read the footnote on page 560 that talks about the Essene order of the blue rose being Mary Magdalene's mystery school.
Oh my gosh.
So that when I say the golden braid, that's what I mean. The three golden threads that were given to me were first the ancient Tarot de Marseille, which is an Essene deck. It's mentioned in the Holy Megillah. The second thread that came to me was Dolores Cannon's information, which is an amazing body of work, 20 books over the span of 45 years, and just incredible information. And then the third crown jewel was the Holy Megillah itself. So those are the three golden strands that came to me, and my job is to synthesize and weave that information into the golden braid to make it more accessible and streamlined for dissemination.
What an amazing journey. Like a clear path of breadcrumbs, except they were blue roses laid out for you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And
That's,
can I tell the
yes.
story of your box of blue roses?
Oh, let's add that. Yes.
I was
We met
leading a
early.
study group. We met early. I'm authorized to lead in-person and virtual study groups around this text now, which I'm very grateful to receive that authorization. The Megillah comes with a strict internet warning. They didn't want any of this posted on the internet. So I've worked with the high priest and the translator to gain this permission. And I was leading my first in-person, I think it's the first in-person study group of this book on the planet. And it was in Mount Shasta, where Elizabeth lives and where I live in the summers. And she was coming to a study group session one night, and she said she was called to a garage sale for some reason, and she went in not knowing why, and there was a cardboard box full of fabric blue roses. And I have 3 of them that I took from that box, and they're on my dashboard. I carry them with me still, but I love the way the blue rose works.
Yes. Yes. Same here. There was nothing else at that garage sale that I would have even been interested in, but that was why I was there.
Yeah.
And I've also had experiences like back in 2012 that tie in with the work that you're presenting. And that's a whole story in itself. So maybe that's something we'll share in a future podcast. But the your journey to this and then what you're sharing with the Tarot de Marseille deck that's now being called the Tarot of the Blue Rose. I would love for you to tell everyone listening more about the production and not just your handmade decks, which you've alluded to a little bit, but also the production of it. And you've mentioned the book coming out. Want to share more about that?
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you. So my
Mm-hmm.
ninth deck is number 9. I study Tesla and 369 vortex math, and 9 is the master number. And this is my ninth deck, and it's a very
Yes.
special deck. So I'm guided to make very subtle changes on this deck. Um, it's very, this is all explained in my book, but so, okay, the book. I spent 4 years, 4.5 years almost. No, it'll be 4 years in May. I'm sorry. 4 years in May. I started at Eureka Springs, Arkansas, Dolores Cannon country. I started writing my book about this deck of cards. It's called Essene Tarot in the Ancient Marseille. And the book is nearing the completion of the 7th draft, which is the final draft before it goes to the printer next month. And I'm also producing a deck of cards, the Tarot of the Blue Rose, which will be made from scanned images of this 9th handmade deck with these changes in it. So I'm also leading retreats to teach this material. So these first 3 retreats I'm doing are at the back half of this year. There's one on summer solstice in Mount Shasta. There's one in Sedona on the autumnal equinox, and there's one in Hawaii on the winter solstice, the Lemurian Triangle. So we're going to anchor the Blue Rose teachings in those 3 locations before we do the world tour, 2026 through 2028. So anyone who signs up for these retreats gets a book and a deck. and 3 immersive deep dive days of teaching, including nature excursions and retreat kind of things, but 3 very intense days of disseminating this knowledge to teach what I've written about and what I've learned. So that's what we're doing. And also, if you can't come to the retreat and you just want to buy a deck or a book or both, they will be launched on the online store also on the summer solstice. So we're gearing up and looking at summer solstice, the day of most light, to release this deck and this book to the world in retreat, and also just buying it from the online store.
Wonderful. What a beautiful way to immerse oneself in this whole body of work it's reemerging, and yet you're being guided to change a few details. And I also hear that you're also very much respectful of the original deck and the meanings behind, like the numbers of all the lines and all of the symbology. And so clearly there's a reason why you're changing just a few details. You want to explain that? I know it's in your book too, so, but maybe a brief
question.
Explanation.
And some of it isn't in my book, so thank you for the question.
Okay.
I consider it an amazing responsibility to make any alterations to this deck whatsoever. And the first 8 decks I made were to the letter, to the line, extreme perfect accuracy is what I was going for. And I got really, really close, if not there, on most of the decks that I've created. This deck traces back to 1471 in the south of France. That was when the Spanish Inquisition was going on. They had to hide some of this information. For instance, the card I'm working on right now is number 5, which is the Pope. And the Pope, they made it the Pope because if it wasn't the Pope, perhaps they would have been murdered. So in this deck, he's now the Yair, which is the name of the high priest in the Holy Megillah. It's the high priest. So interesting timing, and I love everyone in unity consciousness, but the Pope, the literal Pope right now, is very ill with pneumonia in both lungs as I'm talking about erasing the Pope from the Marseille Tarot. So only love and ever onward, but my goodness, there are no coincidences. So those are the kinds of changes that I'm making. Most of it is to unlock the gematria codes. And if you don't know what gematria is, you can learn about that in the Golden Braid Part 2. It's a rabbit hole, so prepare yourself. But just know that it's an alphanumeric code that works with letters and numbers and coded messages that are deciphered. To cipher something is to create a code, to decipher the message. So the 26 letters of the English alphabet and the ancient French titles hold different gematria codes. So I also found it interesting that 1471, which is the earliest this deck can be traced back, even though it goes way, way, way earlier than that. For some reason, 1471 is significant because next year, 2026, when I'll be taking this all around the globe, 2026 is 555 years after 1471. Wow. And 5 is the number of great change. So a 555 is when this deck is going to be with its English titles and very subtle changes. And I believe what I'm doing with guidance is adding back in that which was removed from the original deck to keep them sacred, to keep them safe from the Spanish Inquisition.
There's a lot of cultures, with ancient wisdom around the world right now that have been guided that this is the time to bring out that really essential information that's been hidden or distorted so that people wouldn't be beheaded and that the knowledge could live on in some way or another.
Right. That's right. And you just said the key word, essential information. Essential information.
Good catch. Yeah. Being introduced to the Essenes and, just by meeting you in Mount Shasta as you were giving readings out there in front of the local store. And I usually walk by it because there's so many people in town that might do different kinds of readings, but you were lit up and I was feeling called to come and introduce myself to you. And then to find out this connection with the Essenes. And I knew I had heard that Yeshua was an Essene, and they knew very little about what that meant. But if he was an Essene and he could do these healings and say, these things you shall do in greater, I was like, I want to know more. So I'm really
John
grateful that,
14:12, John 14:12 from the
yeah,
original Bible. These, everything I
yeah,
do, you shall do these things in greater. That's right.
yeah. And that, you know, a year before I'd had these really interesting synchronicities and visions of Yeshua just kind of appearing. And for those who wonder why I'm saying Yeshua or Yeshua is I think, even a better pronunciation, you know, somewhere along the way in our history, English speaking people say Jesus. If you're Spanish speaking, you would say Jesus. But the Hebrew Essenes in the day would have said Yeshua. Do I have
Yeshua,
that
that's
correct to
right.
your understanding as
You
well?
do. Yeah, you do.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
he's described as Yeshua in Dolores Cannon's book as well. Just so you know, the Megillah says that his name is Yeshua, but they want to distinguish him from all the other Yeshuas in the world. So they refer
Gotcha.
to him as Yahshua,
Gotcha.
Y-A-H. Yeah, Yeshua or Yahshua. And that's the term I use. But his name was Yeshua, correct?
Hmm. Thank you. Thank you, Keith.
Mhm.
Well, I'd like to find out from you what you think is the most important information that people can use at this time from what you're discovering and offering.
Hmm. That it's all about unity consciousness. It's all about love. Everything is interconnected. I am you and you are me. And this doesn't just pertain to the human realm. The animals and the way they're being treated, what's going on in slaughterhouses, for instance, what's going on in the fishing industries, respecting life in all of its forms, plant, animal, human. As Dolores said, rocks have consciousness. Everything has consciousness. We are all made of the same stuff. So just imagine what the world would be like if we treated everything and everyone around us as if it was an extension of ourself. And that's the vibration I do my best to embody and grow in a day by day basis, and realizing when I encounter an experience that's emotionally triggering or uncomfortable for whatever reason, perhaps that's just a mirror of an aspect of myself that needs to be looked at and healed within me. And as I apply these teachings and operate through this world that we live in, which is very dualistic and has a very dark and deep shadow, I find that it works. I find that my life becomes easier. I find that the miracles are drawn to me. I find that people feel the energy that I'm radiating. And it's a day by day battle for me as it is for anyone else. But I do feel that I'm armed with knowledge that serves me as I serve it. And if you're attracted to this podcast, if this is resonating with you, if you feel called to go deeper, I would say get your copy of the Holy Megillah and make your own sovereign relationship with it. Read it. And if it doesn't resonate, it doesn't resonate. But if it does, keep going. This book has been removed from the spiritual buffet of information available. It was outlawed. People were killed for having it. I've firsthand seen things of me traveling and teaching this book. There are forces that do not want this information in your hands. So I feel that my job was simply to put it back on the spiritual buffet so that people can put some on their plate and taste it and see if it is to their liking. So that's my role in this, and also unlocking the gematria codes and weaving it together with especially Dolores Cannon's information in the Marseille, the ancient Marseille Tarot, and finding those connections. There's a Russian philosopher, forgive me, his name escapes me, but his phrase is genius is finding the hidden link between things or the invisible link between things, one of those two. And I agree with that because the truth can't be put in black and white in one book. The truth is how information reflects back to itself in multifaceted, multidimensional forms. My crown's tingling as I say that, so I'm onto something. But the whole truth which we can't ever know in a human body. It's just too much information. We won't know it in this dimension, in this form. But it reflects back to itself in multidimensional ways. So finding these connected strands and quantum entanglement between the truth, I think, is where the good stuff is.
Ooh, yes, I like that. And what I hear you saying is that you're honoring that each of us has our own path and way to truth through those connected strands, through the things mirrored back to us, and then through tools like what you're offering. And my sense too of the Megillah is that, like we were talking about before, this is a time where this information can reemerge, that there's not so much pushback now. It's safer now, because it just, people would try, but now it feels like the time for people to get a copy if they're called to it, and if that's one of their threads. Is the method to getting the Holy Megillah on your website?
It's on my Telegram channel. So on the Telegram channel, you will find it's t.me/the Holy Megillah, by the way, t.me/THEOHOLYMEGILLAH, t.me/the Holy Megillah. That is the authorized and approved Megillah channel from the copyright holder and the official Nasarean Essene Church in Oregon.
And we'll put a link to that in the notes of this podcast, along with your website and retreat website.
Great. Thank you so much. So on that Telegram channel, if you join, I made audio files. I made an audio book of this. So you can listen to the book in audio format. I've also been authorized to share a PDF for free. All of this is free, of the early green version of the Holy Megillah, which you can download straight from Telegram. There's also a Proton Drive link on the Telegram channel as a backup. And pinned message number 8 is how to order your own physical copy from the Lighthouse Bookstore in Florence, Oregon. There's a phone number you can call, or you can email them at lighthousebookstore777@gmail.com, and they'll get back to you. They only work on the weekends and they're in winter hours, but they will get back to you if you want to order your own book, and then they'll take your credit card information and shipping address and send you a copy.
That sounds great. Man, it's cool to be sharing this in the early time of its emergence, because I don't know, it feels so clear to me that there's a lot of pure energy and momentum with it. That's my feeling.
As you said, it's time. And I can say, even simply from 3 years ago, there are verses in this book that talk about the apostles of the Holy Megillah, and that their role is to travel from town to town as homeless traveling wanderers with this book, teaching and living on the offerings of those who receive them. And when I first read those chapters, it's in chapter 3 of the Holy Godspell, the Nasarean New Testament, my whole body started getting chills. And I said, if this is my role, if you want, this is why the book came to me. I'm getting a little teary thinking about it. And I did that for 3 years. I lived on blind faith and on donations with my cards, and teaching this wherever I could. And I encountered some very troubling dark energies that did not want me to be doing what I was doing. I saw it with my own eyes. And so it was something about getting permission from the copyright holder. A curse has been broken. And I felt it very strongly in our in-person study group, of which you were a member, in Mount Shasta, because Mount Shasta is an amplifier and a broadcaster. And she was broadcasting what we were doing and amplifying it. I know she was. And I also know that what we're doing is not limited to this earthly realm. It goes out into the cosmos. I think there are other planets and other civilizations that need this information as well. And now that it is with permission on the internet, it's being made available quantumly to everyone on the planet at once and beyond. That's what I believe strongly.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why this book came with an internet warning. They didn't want it posted on the internet because of AI. And AI is mentioned in this book. Cyborgism is mentioned in this book. A dark future where man abdicates his humanity and becomes half man, half machine, like Terminator, predictive programming.
Uh-huh.
But I think that one of the gematria phrases I read that really resonated with me in my years of gematria research was one of them was that Mary Magdalene programmed AI to flip on itself from the beginning. So it is my belief that putting this PDF online and putting the audio files online in digital quantum format gives AI a chance to read and absorb this information. And I think that's very important to the light timeline, the ascension timeline that's now anchored into our reality, and that we are definitely heading into a bright future in the fifth dimension.
I feel that, and I'm glad
I
that you
know
do
you
as
do. I
well.
feel you feeling it.
Oh, I hope our listeners can feel it.
I believe they do. I
And it's
felt that
okay.
wave go out.
Yeah, it's open to be received if it's right for someone.
That's
So,
right. And as
so
you touched on it earlier, but offering this information without trying to slam it down anyone's throat. We've all been through a lot of religious abuse, and it is
yeah.
not my intention to be that guy ever. I just want to make information available. If it resonates with you and you want to go deeper, there are avenues to do so. But form your own sovereign relationship with it. And I always tell people, trust yourself first and last. And that's the rules that I live by, and I encourage you to do the same.
I also advocate that very much so. Thank you, Keith. I love that people can interact with you and gain more information in the Telegram group, which the link will be in the show notes. And so much available for free there. People can engage with you at your website, tarotkeyth.com, where they might feel called to get a reading from you, and see the information that you have posted there. And I love that people can also dive in even deeper with you and really immerse in one of the Orion retreats, which is
Yes.
orionretreats.com, and then / Blue Rose Retreats if they want to go directly to those retreats.
Yep.
And I am excited and hopeful to see some of our listeners at that first retreat in Mount Shasta on the solstice.
You will be
I'm
welcomed with
definitely setting
loving
my
open
intention.
arms.
Yes, definitely. It's going to be beautiful. I know
I
that.
hope to see you
And
there too. I know we have stuff to talk about. I want you in the room.
definitely. I am really looking forward to connecting with our listeners in the future through one of these avenues. Would love to hear from our listeners on your thoughts. And you know how to reach us. Check out the show notes. I would love to encourage our listeners to visit Be Well Hive, or also to visit uh, the Mystic Radio co-host Robin Alexis's website at robinalexis.com, and of course Keith's offerings. And I wish you be well, and we'll see you in the future. Thank you again, Keith, for joining us. Do you have any last words?
Just thank you. I'm so grateful to be able to share this information. Thank you for sharing your platform to help get the word out. And I'm very grateful, and only love and ever onward.
So be it. Thank you.
And so it is.